Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to cut right through the noise today and break down a highly complex day of global events, looking for the connective tissue holding our world together. We're looking specifically at reports from August 9, 2026, a day that perfectly captures that really delicate balance between international order and, well, total systemic breakdown. So let's just dive right into the data and map out exactly how these geopolitical, environmental, and domestic dominoes are falling.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering Middle East escalations, global defense and diplomacy, averting domestic political crises, extreme weather displacement, and finally, tragic infrastructure disasters. All right, starting with Middle East escalations and high-stakes geopolitics. This is where friction points are rapidly heating up across multiple borders all at once. Now, take a look at the stark contrast between these two frameworks. On one hand, we've got President Trump's proposed Gaza peace plan, which aims for a structured resolution. But right up against that, we see Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's public pushback on key parts of that exact framework. The reports make it crystal clear. Netanyahu is stating absolutely no Israeli force withdrawal from the Gaza Strip until Hamas is genuinely disarmed. This isn't just a minor diplomatic hiccup, right? It's a fundamental split on the absolute prerequisites for peace, and it sets a very rigid baseline for any future talks.
And if you want to see just how dense these escalations are, look at this timeline of a single day. In the morning hours of our data, Iranian Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei shakes up his leadership, naming former military advisor Major General Mohsen Rezai as the new national security chief. And this is right as Iran is demanding sanction relief before reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Then, boom, in the afternoon, we see direct kinetic action. Iran-backed Houthi rebels launch a drone salvo at a major Saudi Aramco refinery in Jazan, while separate strikes on ports leave 4 Yemeni soldiers dead. By the evening, CENTCOM General Brad Cooper is on the ground in Israel for high-level security meetings, literally surrounded by live border exchanges in southern Lebanon. It's wild how fast regional stability can fracture on multiple fronts.
So how's the U.S. handling this specific bottleneck at the Strait of Hormuz? Well, according to the sources, President Trump says the U.S. is low-keying direct military strikes on Tehran. Instead, they're pivoting hard toward letting intense economic pressure force Iran to reopen the waterway. It's a very calculated step back from immediate military engagement in favor of pure financial strangulation.
But the really crucial question here is why this shift is happening right now. And it turns out it's not just diplomatic preference, it's logistics. Leaked Pentagon memos show some very real pressing concerns within the military about declining inventories of precision air defense missiles. Think about it. When you don't have the stockpiles to guarantee prolonged defensive coverage, your entire strategic calculation has to change. This shortage is a massive hidden variable directly pushing that decision to low-key the direct strikes.
Which leads us right into global defense and diplomacy. Let's look at this matrix of alliances to see how nations are securing their interests. This completely cuts through all the usual diplomatic jargon. We're seeing Ukraine securing a vital commitment from the U.S. for monthly Patriot missile deliveries to counter Russian drones. At the same time, Syria and Russia are formalizing their footprint, securing long-term Russian access to the Khmeimim Air Base and the Tartus Naval Facility. But it's not all weapons and bases. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan are actually reporting real diplomatic progress toward a comprehensive peace treaty. And then there's a massive new trilateral defense pact between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. Though Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan was very careful to clarify that this pact is purely defensive, completely undirected at Iran or any other neighbors.
Let's shift gears to averting domestic political crises and maintaining equilibrium, because amidst all these global shifts, a pretty huge potential crisis was quietly managed stateside.
Just look at that margin, 90-6. In an era where intense political polarization is basically the norm, the U.S. Senate voted by an overwhelming majority to pass a short-term continuing resolution. This decisive move fully funds federal operations through December 11th. So they effectively completely sidestepped what would have been a highly disruptive pre-midterm government shutdown, keeping things stable at home while juggling that wild geopolitical landscape abroad.
Moving on to extreme weather displacing thousands. We're pivoting from political maneuvers to the entirely uncontrollable variables of nature.
380,000. That staggering number represents the residents across 8 entire regions in the Philippines who were displaced basically overnight. Heavy southwest monsoon rains, heavily intensified by trailing tropical cyclones, caused absolutely devastating flooding.
We are talking about a total mass exodus of the population.
To put the sheer massive scale of the Philippine crisis into perspective, let's compare it to other simultaneous emergencies. That 380,000 vastly overshadows the 20,000 residents forced to evacuate across Canada's Okanagan Valley due to explosive wildfires, or the roughly 390 people stranded by a severe landslide that wiped out roads in Japan's Nagano prefecture. Obviously, every single one of these is a tragedy, but seeing them side by side really underscores the catastrophic volume of that monsoon's impact.
And these environmental extremes aren't just hitting human settlements. They are literally choking vital ecosystems and maxing out government resources. British Columbia actually had to declare a full provincial state of emergency just to mobilize enough resources to fight those Okanagan Valley fires. Meanwhile, over in Indonesia, authorities had to completely shut down the famous Mount Bromo tourist destination in East Java. Firefighters there are just desperately struggling to contain wildfires that are actively threatening those highly sensitive natural ecosystems. Finally, we land on tragic infrastructure disasters, looking at what happens when the systems we rely on fail.
Transport accidents have sparked some incredibly tragic, high death tolls recently across the African continent, and it really pulls back the curtain on these deep, systemic vulnerabilities and how hazardous materials are moved through populated areas.
Within a frighteningly short window, two completely distinct but equally catastrophic events unfolded. First, an overturned diesel tanker exploded in the Central African Republic, instantly killing at least 20 people. And then, in a separate incident, a massive highway crash in western Niger left another 22 people dead. Combined, these accidents claimed over 40 lives, which really highlights the lethal vulnerabilities in regional supply chains.
So after tracking today's really intense mix of war, fragile diplomacy, catastrophic weather, and infrastructure collapse, I want to leave you with this thought. When we map out just one single day of global data, we see exactly how heavily we rely on this intricate, fragile web of systems. So the big question is, just how interconnected and, more importantly, how resilient is the global equilibrium we rely on every single day? Thank you for exploring these complex forces with me. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and we'll see you in the next explainer.